Hey everybody, Stu Smith here with another Tactical Fitness Report, and we have special guest Nick Barringer, Lieutenant Colonel Nick Barringer. Thank you so much for being here with us today, and we're going to really hit this one hard on some nutrition, but we're going to circle it all around and hug the term longevity, right? And exactly what that means for guys our age, as well as guys that are in their teens and 20s. You know, how can they start hitting that? So before we get started, Nick, thank you so much for being on. I really do appreciate you joining us.
No, Stu, it's my pleasure, and I've told you multiple times. You were the first exposure I had to tactical fitness, so it's again my honor to be here and be a part of it.
Well, thank you. You know, if you're reading some of the stuff I wrote over 20 years ago, I'm a little embarrassed because I have evolved since. But no, but thank you. I do appreciate that. So your background, I really want to have you on here for many reasons. One, I love your Instagram page. It's very fun, especially your 3 a.m. ACFT workouts that you were doing at the military academy up at West Point. That was pretty hardcore. It was just fun because I'm an early morning guy myself, and it's fun to see, you know, people working out in the dark before the sun comes
suffering
up.
with you, people.
So, yeah, just suffering with me. Absolutely.
Yeah.
But you know, you being, you know, having a PhD in nutrition performance or performance nutrition, you know, and you know, you're kind of in that world as well as a lieutenant colonel in the Army. You know, so this is a perfect marriage of tactical fitness, nutrition, and you and I are both in that aging category where we're past 40, you know, and what things look like now, you know, and many of my readers are in the younger range, but I still have people who, like yourself, kind of been with me for over 20 years, and now we're in the 40 plus range. So with that, let's start nutrition. You know, nutrition for the tactical athlete, and you know, how has that evolved as you have seen in the last, you know, 15 years of your career?
Wow. Yeah. So what I saw at one point coming in, food was a crutch, right? So I got to spend some time, at Ranger Regiment, and I think
Oh,
when initially, that was a mentality, right? Food's a crutch, as we'll talk about later. Sleep's a crutch, those sort of
oof.
things. And then from that, I've been lucky enough to see Thor 3, the human performance program for the Army, develop and get a lot of great
Oh,
dietitians working
man.
there to fueling the tactical athlete. Now all the way to holistic health and fitness, where the Army is putting dietitians, strength coaches, occupational therapists, physical therapists, all down there at the unit for the individual warfighters, and treating them like the tactical athletes that they are. So seeing that evolution from where it was just long runs 5 days a week, not eating right, probably I think I've heard it's like an EAM diet, nicotine,
Oh,
caffeine,
oof.
diet mostly. And so a lot of that has changed, and now again we're looking at uh, some of the like Go for Green initiatives in the DFAC, where we're using choice architecture, where we're putting our healthy fruits and vegetables up front. West Point just went through that, and their dining area looks amazing, where they're starting to serve more fish during the week. So it's really evolved, and we're kind of following that professional athlete model. And I have to give credit to the SEAL community, because you guys were doing human performance before anybody. And so I remember when we were kind of starting out at Ranger Regiment, we consulted with a lot of those human performance folks in the SEAL community, because they had already been doing it.
Well, I will tell you this: in the 90s, when I first started transitioning into the what is now called tactical fitness, it was not called tactical fitness back then. And I remember actually saying, one of the reasons why I think I really want to go down this road of helping people understand the difference of the types of fitness that you might have had as an athlete that you have now as a military member or law enforcement and firefighter too, is that this world, we didn't treat ourselves like athletes, right? Especially back in the 90s, right? And it's even worse now as a segment of the population, because we now are dealing with many people whose number one reason why they can't serve is because they don't meet the height weight standards. Right? And fitness standards too typically go hand in hand with that. So before we go into like the longevity side, let's talk maybe a little bit about some of the nutritional issues that maybe the younger generation's having. And it can go on both ends of the spectrum. There's always a spectrum on this. Like, I remember being a teenager and was a hard gainer, and it did not matter what I ate. I couldn't gain weight, right? And there's many people like that, but then there's, the other side of that spectrum that are just deconditioned and making poor food choices as well. And that becomes a strategic issue for recruiting. I mean, I think it's potentially dangerous where we are right now with 73% of America is overweight or obese over the age of 20, right? 20 under. I didn't see what the numbers were as teens, but it's pretty darn close.
Oh, 100%. I would say it's a national security issue. 3 out of 4 of, military eligible individuals can't, meet the standards because of some sort of issue like that, where we're talking body composition or can't meet the physical, fitness standards. So what I've seen, again, with soldiers, they're going to be a reflection of the average American population, because that's where we're getting them from.
Sure.
So, relying on fast food, convenience food, eating those sort of things. Another, big thing I've seen is drinking calories. That's the biggest. I can't tell you, Stu, how many young soldiers I'll just talk to them about, hey, how many Mountain Dews are you drinking a day? How many sodas are you drinking a day? And I won't change anything with their diet. I'll just have them stop doing that or switch to diet soda, and voila, they lose weight. Right? It's
Oh, yeah.
because your body just doesn't register. You're drinking these calories. The other big issue I've seen working with like kind of the overweight and over fat program in the Army and body composition. When I was at Fort Hood, we saw that most of our participants that were coming into that program had suffered a profile within the past 6 to 3 months. And so kind of talking to these soldiers, I found a lot of these soldiers, they would control their body composition through exercise.
Absolutely.
Right. And I have a saying, you can't outrun a crappy diet. And what would happen is they would just be doing this volume. They would get injured. Now all of a sudden they're eating the same, but they're not getting the same output. And so they gain weight. They go on the program. As soon as they're off that profile, they're right back to running, but now they're heavier. So now they're getting injured again. And it was kind of a vicious cycle until, we stopped. We're like, hey, we got to address this nutrition and get it under control, get your body composition down, do low impact before you get back to running, because, adding 10, 20, 30 pounds to your body weight and then running, not a good recipe for success.
Yeah, absolutely. That's like rucking. You just went from running to rucking post injury, and you're starting all over again. Right. So yeah, it's not a smart progression at all. Yeah, you know what? And that's very similar to the journey of the aging athlete as well. Though it may not be injury related, it is definitely physical output related. Because, when we're younger, we're maybe playing sports in high school, staying active in college, or, maybe have a younger, more intramural type, recreational leagues that are happening when you're younger. And then all of a sudden you start working full time, and all of the fun stuff that you were doing that were, physical activities are gone, but you're still eating like you were a hard gainer. Right. And that happens with athletes too, especially like the athlete who's trying to stay big and, with some of these contact sports, and they're just, next thing you know, they're 30, 35 years old, 100 pounds bigger than they were when they were active. And now that's also just happens to when all those old contact sports and athletic injuries start saying, hey, remember me? I'm that messed up shoulder
Right.
and messed up knee that you had back when you were 18. They start reappearing, in your later years too. So that's one of the reasons why I wanted to talk about this longevity, but not omit the younger generation, because it starts with the younger generation. It starts in your teens and 20s, believe it or not.
Oh yeah, 100% is, if, the time to start thinking about longevity is in your 20s. So if anybody, any of your younger listeners talking to this is when you're bulletproof, is when you want to, or think you're bulletproof at least, is when you want to start those habits, because those habits you develop is what's going to keep you kind of healthy into your 40s, into your 50s. Whereas if you develop the bad habits in your 20s, yeah, you might be able to get away with them, but you're going to hit a breaking point. It's inevitable. You're going to hit that breaking point. And then not only will you be dealing with injuries potentially later on, but then when we get out of the Army, we see a lot of, soldiers, dealing with disease states, type 2 diabetes, those sort of issues, to your point, where, they were forced to do PT 5 days a week. And that was kind of their energy balance. Now they're out. They're still not eating good. They never address their diet, but they're not forced to exercise. So they're not exercising. Now you're gaining weight. Now again, blood lipids go up, blood pressure goes up. Again, risk for type 2 diabetes go up. So all these other factors come into play.
Oh man. And let me just be honest too. When I was in my 20s, the last thing I was concerned about was longevity. And I
Yeah.
didn't do anything correctly. And by 29, 30 years old, when I was getting out of the Navy, I was broken. I really was. I had stress fractures, I had ankle injury, had a shoulder injury, had a lower back injury, and it was not getting better. Nothing was getting better until I strategically addressed it. And I had to actively pursue recovery, right? And I think that is a term that I think will carry you into your later years, even when you're younger, if you start addressing recovery smarter. Because really, longevity is basically you have mastered recovery. If you
Mm.
are doing things in your 50s and 60s and 70s that you were doing in your 20s and 30s, you have mastered the ability to recover from stress. And that's all stresses, whether it's emotional, physical, mental, work stress, home stress. It doesn't matter. Stress hormones are stress hormones. And you are able to metabolize those through various methods. And we're going to talk about those. You have mastered recovery. So I link longevity with recovery mastery, and they're hand in hand. And I didn't really learn how to do it until I was in my 30s. And I got smarter. I got smarter with my training. I got smarter with my nutrition and mobility and flexibility. Those were big parts of it too. So if you would, let's turn it into nutrition being a major part of your ability to recover from today's stress when you're young, as well as, move you into a more longevity era when you're older.
Yeah. Yeah. So, with nutrition, there's a lot of information out there, some good, some bad, different trendy diets, et cetera. But what the research keeps coming back to is, you know, good sources of high quality protein, lean protein,
Mm-hmm.
mostly fruits and vegetables, throughout the, spaced throughout the day. And then, making sure you're hydrated. Uh,
Mm,
I wish I had something more magical to say, but
no.
that's really it. It goes back to the basics. Now some of the issues that will decrease your ability to recover and decrease your longevity is a lot of now we're seeing is like the convenient and they have a compound advanced glycolation end products, and this is when lipids and fats are under high heat. Red meat, sadly, when you sear it, you get a lot of these products, and there's
Oh,
more and more research showing that as these build up in your tissues, it affects metabolism and how it functions. There was a study out of China. They followed over 5,000 individuals over the age of 40, and they just did a simple strength test of a grip test, right? And they followed them over a year. And those that had the most AGEs in their diet lost the most strength. And there's several other studies like this. So, there are some things we can do. One, avoid those kind of prepackaged, sugary type products. If we're going to have that steak and we're going to sear it, if you put some citric acid, some lemon juice, or that's been shown to lower the amount of AGEs. Because I will say, don't sear your meat, but come on.
Yeah.
You're going to sear your meat.
Yeah, I have a grill.
I got my grill. I'm gonna get those perfect sear marks on there. But just respecting that. Hey, I'm not doing that every night. I'm not having that every day. But little things like that is big. The other big thing is kind of talking about meat is protein quality. Again, what the research is showing is we do not handle protein as efficiently in our 40s as we might have in our 20s. So that's why it's important not only to, make sure we're getting enough, but then space throughout the day, where, most of the older individuals, they're getting maybe their total protein quality, but they're getting most of it at dinner. Whereas breakfast, they're not coming anywhere close to it. Well, that's gonna affect protein synthesis. So you want to have that space throughout the day. And then you want protein with a high digestible, indispensable amino acid score. So that's going to mostly be coming from animal products, right? Now you might have some vegans or vegetarians. I don't know if you have listening to this. I'm not saying you can't get your required amount of protein from plant products. It's just a lot harder to do. You're going to have to be smart about it. Leucine, one of the big, essential amino acids that trigger all this muscle protein synthesis, you can get the amount you need in about 140 calories of beef. You'd probably need about 1,100 calories of quinoa to get that same amount. So again, just understanding that, moving forward and when we're talking about, kind of protein quality, I think is also important.
That's impressive because quinoa is like the superfood of a plant food.
Yeah, and it's great, and I actually have quinoa packed for lunch today. But when we're talking about I am not relying on quinoa for my protein. I'm getting I think today I'm getting it from salmon. And then for my breakfast I do a yogurt, a high protein yogurt. Yeah. And I'm shooting for about 30 to 40 grams per meal.
Oh, okay. So the age old amount of protein, the old formula that it was like for every kilogram of body weight, you need a gram of protein. Is that still hold true, or would you say you need a little bit more as you age? Or what about when you're a hard gainer? I'm sorry to do this to you. How about when you're a hard gainer as a teenager? Is there do you metabolize protein differently as a teenager, or do you need more of it?
All great questions, and I'll break it down. So first with the, kind of we're talking about the aging athlete or the older athlete, 1.7 grams per kilogram of body weight or 0.8 per pound. You could go up to, also a gram per pound. Now, when I might do that is if I'm in a caloric deficit. So if you're in a caloric deficit, I up my protein intake to preserve that lean muscle mass, right? Okay. So that's where I would probably go a gram per pound. With the teenagers, I am usually not as worried. You know what I see with the young folks I've worked with is they're not getting enough calories. If you get enough calories, that protein will be used for muscle protein synthesis. But even if you're taking tons of protein and you're not getting enough calories, it's going to be oxidized. It's a fuel source. You're basically teaching your body to use protein as a fuel source.
So you need to up your carbs, saying? Yeah.
Up your carbs. Yeah. With teenagers, I see it's more of a carbohydrate issue. For some reason, they're scared of them, or they don't know, to get more of them. So if you're trying to gain weight, you have to be in an energy surplus. If you're in an energy surplus, about 1.7 grams per kilogram of protein per body weight, you should gain.
Okay. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. One thing that I have used with my son, who, when he was in 8th grade, he was 6'3" and 140 pounds. So yeah, he grew like 8 inches one year. right? It was ridiculous.
Wow.
6'3", 180 pounds. Now, by the time he was a senior in high school, he was 6'3", and flirting with 200. So 195, 200 pounds, and looked really good. Right. And put on, we're lifting weights. And, when we started, it was mainly calisthenics. But every day and every morning, all I would do is I wish I had one of them here, just an instant breakfast drink for him, just vanilla flavored instant breakfast, had like 20 grams of protein, but loaded with sugar, but it had some other vitamins in it and things like that. And it's just a real cheap way for teens to add in some, not only good protein, but also extra carbs and some vitamins as well. And I swear that and peanut butter and jelly sandwiches were the thing that put him over the top.
Hey, it doesn't have to be complex again. And for those folks, especially, kind of like the hard gainers, I say, hey, would you skip a workout? Well, if you wouldn't skip a workout, don't skip a meal. You got to look at eating is the same as, it's just as important as your workouts. And it can become, laborsome for those young, and I get it. I remember being young. It's like, no matter how much food I ate, it was so hard to gain weight. And so you have to approach it like that. So yeah, instant breakfast, peanut butter jelly sandwich, however you can get those calories in.
That's another good point too, as we move into that young person going into let's say they're going into a tactical profession. They're now tactical athletes, and they notice, oh wow, I'm putting on weight now because I'm now in my 20s and early 30s. My way I learn to eat has to change, right? I am no longer a hard gainer. You will realize this one day. You are no longer a hard gainer, and it's actually kind of easy to gain weight. I used to kid myself or joke around. If I look at food, I gain weight, and if I look at weights, I get stronger. Right? It's just like the two are just a weird combo for me. So, as we're aging, how is that changing a little bit?
Right. So for one, what's interesting, there was a paper that just came out that was kind of, in the news cycle, that metabolism doesn't really lower as much when we age. You probably saw that. We lose muscle mass, and then just by a function of our job. So think about, I'll use my career as, or military. I'm a dietitian, so it doesn't work quite as well. So maybe we say infantry. So, that PL, that infantry PL, young person, they're out there with their soldiers. They're doing PT every morning. They're getting after it. Company commander, probably still, but then once you go to S3, that's a different animal. They're in the operations, you're mostly sitting at a desk now. And then as they progress up the ranks, it's the same thing. And even in the corporate world. So that's kind of what I think you have to assess, is how much of your day is really being physically active. If you're out there, training with your war fighters, your sailors, your soldiers every day, out in the field doing those sort of things, your energy expenditure is going to be a lot higher. Whereas if you're mostly sitting behind a desk, typing, putting out op orders, et cetera, it's going to be a lot lower. And being cognizant of that and what's your job. Exercise, again, although you can burn a lot of calories from a percentage of total, energy expenditure, it's not that much. It's basically that daily activity. What you do for work is where you're, where most of your day spent, you should look at.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. And unfortunately, we are creatures of habit, and we tend to eat the way we always ate.
Yep.
And just acknowledging that as you grow older is going to save you a lot of heartache of having to lose 50 pounds when you're 38 years old, right? I see it all the time. I mean, it's just, it's everywhere. And just acknowledging just the way you eat. And I hate the saying, move more, eat less, but I'm telling you, it's so true. I mean, I lose weight when I'm like battling these challenges. I lose weight when I just, because I eat well, but I can eat a lot. right? And I can add that extra piece of steak in there and that extra piece of chicken that I don't necessarily need. Is I just have to, it's portion control. Even if when you're eating clean, it still comes down to portion control, because you can add another 500 calories real quick.
Oh, super easy. Well,
Yeah.
and I'll give another, that happens as we age that we didn't even think of to talk about, but I'll bring it up, is kids.
Oh,
Once
yeah.
you throw kids in the mix, like Stu, how often do you, your kids don't eat something and then you
Oh,
eat it
I
off their
finish
plate?
it for them. Absolutely. Yeah.
And that adds up. And I even, kind of figured out, I gained a little weight and I'm like, where is these calories coming from? And then I realized, I've got a son and a daughter. I'm like, well, I'm cleaning their plate every night, before I throw it away. And so I'm like, all right, I gotta, accept, cut back on mine, or just realize, I'm
Save it for
strategic about
leftovers.
how much I put on my plate. Yeah.
Yeah. I try to just save it all for leftovers and be less work I need to do the next meal. We've kind of gotten there with the younger generation moving into the older generation, Nick. So now, as we've aged out of our military service life, what's the difference that typically has to occur for the retiree, who I would say is in phase 4 of tactical fitness, the retired post-service life, reduced physical activity, eating on your own? What are some of the things that we need to now concern ourselves with? And now what I'd like to do is not only take it on the nutrition side, but let's look at the whole picture of all the ways to recover, and how, as we age, we have to be perfect with understanding all the ways to recover.
Yeah, that's a great question, Stu. When you get out of the military, not as active, and then particularly if you kind of had been served your food or eaten in the DFAC, you might not understand portion control as much. So I think there is a benefit to measuring out your food initially, kind of looking at and seeing, hey, what does 500 calories look like? What does this look like? And then understanding it, and then understanding the consequences if you go over that, in terms of looking up, how much energy you have to expend, if you really want those cookies or what have you. So I think that's a good exercise to do, when you get out. Again, the best way to do this is to develop these habits while you're in, so they just transfer versus starting from scratch. But if we want to look at maximizing longevity, as we age, there was a study out of Spain where they followed individuals from 60 to their 70s. And what they found is, if you wanted to triple your chances of making it to 70, don't smoke, eat a healthy diet. A healthy diet was, fish, low in red meat, high in things, fish, chicken, fruits and vegetables, exercise regularly, sleep 7 to 8 hours a night, sit less than 8 hours a day. I'm talking to you at a standing desk. I like to, get up, try to move around. And then here's one that's really important, I think, particularly with our military folks, is daily contact with your friends. That was another factor. If you want to triple your chances of living to 70, was daily contact with your friends. So when you get out, you just lost contact with some of those military, friends that maybe you had, or that community or that tribe. Stay in contact with them, or find, like-minded individuals to stay in contact with, because we kind of get that natural, provided natural friends in the military, right? You're around these folks. Your work life in the military, I feel like, bleeds over into family more than other jobs, right?
Yeah.
And so when you take that away, particularly if that's your identity, that can be very challenging. So maintaining that daily contact with folks is also an important factor.
That's a really good point, because all of those things that you just listed helps us with the other side of stress. Like, if you had a balance beam, when you're really, really getting stressed, right, there's other things in your life that can help you balance that out. And now those hormones are imbalanced, which, the hormonal system is really designed to stay in balance. And it's not that difficult to be out of balance to the point where we're just always stressed, hypervigilant, um, sympathetically charged in our nervous system. And there are things that we can do, from nutrition to sleep to relaxing, deep breathing, hobbies, social gatherings. All of those things can help us balance those out a little bit, to just adding to the ability to live longer, live healthier, and not start accumulating those chronic stress illnesses that always plague us in the final, decade of our life, typically.
No, and that's, just those basic things we do it. And I like with the stress thing is, cortisol doesn't care why it's being, produced, whether that's,
Oh.
from your kids or from family or from, particularly hard workouts back to back to back.
Oh
So
yeah.
respecting that and having some sort of mechanism to lower that, again, whether it's breathing, whether it's meditation, whether it's mindfulness, however you want to do that, but some way to address that stress level, because chronic high levels of cortisol is bad. it's
Oh
it's
yeah.
it's good. It's good if you got to, hey, if you got to run or fight, amazing. You want it. But like you said, if you're doing that all the time, and we've seen a term, operator syndrome, you're probably familiar
Yep.
with it, whereas
Yep.
the deployments, the rotations kind of can drive that cortisol level up for extended periods of time, more so than probably meant to be. We didn't evolve doing deployments every couple years, etc.
Yeah.
And then that can suppress your testosterone, and
Oh yeah.
then it doesn't always bounce back. And so these are things to be thinking about, and looking at and getting checked by your primary care provider.
Yeah, absolutely. And sleep is, if I were to make a pie chart, right? And I have done this, and it's a non-scientific pie chart. I won't lie to you, but I wrote a pie chart and I said, this half of the pie chart, if you really want to recover, needs to be focused on your sleep, right? This other 40% of the pie chart needs to be focused on your nutrition. And you could probably flip those two back and forth, 40% sleep, 50% nutrition, back and forth. But I really do think that 90% of our recovery, if not 100%, can be solved by the nutrition input and how well we sleep and how much we sleep.
It's funny you say that, Stu. As a dietitian, I'll say sleep's the foundation.
Oh.
I had a young soldier. His might have been a squad leader, or brought him to me. And it's like, hey, he's falling out of run. He's not able to keep up, et cetera, et cetera. And I got talking to him, and I noticed his his dietary recall, a lot of energy drinks. And I'm kind of like, well, why are you drinking so many? And he's only sleeping like 3 or 4 hours a night. So I told him, all right, one task, go and get more sleep. Make sure you're getting at least, 7 hours a night. Like, we'll work on your nutrition later, et cetera. And he comes back, he felt like Superman. He's like, oh, sir, I'm running so much better. Everything's, good. I'm eating better. And it's that foundation, because, when we're sleep deprived, we tend to make poor nutrition decisions. Just, missing a night of sleep, we talked about cortisol, increases your cortisol levels by 21%, decreases your protein synthesis by around 18%, suppresses your testosterone by 4%. That's just one night. That's just,
Wow.
missing one night of sleep. So, imagine if you're doing that chronically, what that's doing to your body. You're going to lose lean muscle mass. You're going to have these sort of issues. You're going to make poor decisions. That's another, kind of thing. There was a study that was done out of Usarium where they looked at marksmanship, and it was a pretty cool study, because there's been the marksmanship studies where you look at target engagement, how fast you engage target, or accuracy, but they put a button on the weapon system to acknowledge friendly targets. So they would pop up target and no shoot target, and you'd have to acknowledge it, versus maybe you just missed it because you weren't paying attention, etc. And what did they find is when these soldiers were sleep deprived, they, missed targets. They were, took them longer to react, and then they misidentified friendly targets.
Oh,
But what was crazy about it at the end, they reported that they were the same. The soldiers were self-reporting they didn't see any decrements in their performance. Yet the researchers showed significant decrements in their performance. So that's also kind of one of the more nefarious things about not getting enough sleep is it's kind of like, folks when they drink too much and they say, hey, I'm good to drive. A lot of people, they don't get enough sleep and they go to work, they go do all these things where they're probably, quote unquote inebriated from not getting enough sleep, but they think they're fine, yet they're
wow.
still making these mistakes.
Wow. And a lot of that is pure caffeine consumption in the later hours of the day that can really jeopardize the amount of sleep or the quality of sleep you're getting. And if you're drinking alcohol prior to sleep, and that gets a little bit increased. I don't know if you ever had one of those Whoop bands, where
I do the Aura ring.
Okay, yeah, you got those. And like, if you ever have a night where you have horrible night's sleep and you see what your recovery levels are, and you're like, oh man, this really sucks. But it is proven that you are not going into an REM level sleep at all, if not, when you want to do it several times over a course of an evening, when you're sleeping, you're missing out on, human growth hormone, dopamine, serotonin, human growth, testosterone. I mean, all of those kind of get replenished in your sleep, and it helps you metabolize all the other, stress hormones that you're having. And largely that increase of caffeine can be the detriment to all of that. I have seen personally too, on the performance side, where people screw up, and this is something you can explain a little better, is prior to like a fitness test, right? And they are like drinking a Monster or getting some extra caffeine or pre-workout, even, thinking it's going to help their performance. Where, when you're doing high repetition calisthenics and you're running fast at a high heart rate, the last thing you want to do is artificially raise your heart rate with caffeinated products, right? Because that's just going to put you in that anaerobic zone long before you're even there, right? It's artificially putting you in an anaerobic zone where you could actually do a majority of the stuff in your aerobic zone. And it just jacks your heart rate up way too much. And next thing you know, you feel like you're having a heart attack. Or unfortunately, there have been teenagers who die taking a PFT, or whatever acronym you're using for branch of service, die from caffeinated, too much caffeine before a fitness test.
Yes, I mean, for caffeine, there's definitely some performance benefits that you can get from it.
Absolutely.
I would have any individual. Yeah, I wouldn't. When I have to do a record PT test, wouldn't be the first time I take caffeine. You would want to practice, and there's different responses. There's people who metabolize it differently than others. What's kind of the dose for. If you're doing fine motor skills, marksmanship, and you're sleep deprived, 200 milligrams has been that. And I think that was a Bud study where they looked at marksmanship. In sport performance, around 5 mgs, they go up to 5 milligrams per kilogram of body weight.
Okay.
Which could be a significant load. If you're a good sized person, that could be 400 mgs. But it's going to vary. But to your point, look at the event, look at what you have to do, practice it, know your kind of limits. And because if you're taking a bunch of stimulants, particularly if it's like a pre-workout where you might have other stimulants kind of combined on top of just, the caffeine. If you're already redlining and you haven't even started the event, that's going to be problematic to your performance. So
where I learned it? I learned it on deployment, and we were in Italy about to go do some training with the Italians. And I was enjoying the culture. I've never been a coffee drinker.
No.
And so I was like, oh, let me try one of these cappuccinos, with my breakfast. Right. And I was like, oh, this is pretty good. Try that. And then go for a run next. And I thought I was going to have a heart attack. I mean, I was like, literally, I was anaerobic before we even started. So
Yeah.
anyway, yeah.
And you might be a slow metabolizer, like, kind of genetically. I know for me, I've never had it tested, and I might at some point, but I'm probably a rapid metabolizer because I'm kind of one of those people that I could drink, I can drink coffee up till about 4 and I'm fine. Now, if
Yeah.
my wife has a cup of coffee at like 3, she's awake all night,
Oh, wow.
so just, knowing your body and knowing kind of how, you might metabolism is also important to know.
No, that's a really good point, because all of this really comes down to you knowing your body, you knowing what calories work for you for amount of daily intake compared to the amount of, physical activity you're doing, amount of sleep that you're getting, how that's going to affect everything from mood to energy levels the next day. Because like I said, when we first started, longevity is the key to longevity is mastering recovery. And there's so many ways to balance out that scale. When we're talking about life stresses, and you can get very stressed from working out way too hard to the point of where now you're constantly just cortisol pumped, from your workouts, when maybe instead of having a really hard workout at the end of a stressful day, you kind of pull back the reins a little bit and you focus on more the parasympathetic side of the nervous system, and you just do some easy cardio versus a HIIT workout or whatever. Those little things like that can make a huge difference in how, once again, over the long term, your body better handles stress.
No, you gotta weigh the risk. Well, and then when you're fatigued, just the chances of you making a mistake, right? Movement wise, kinesthetically.
Oh yeah, yeah.
There was a study, I think it was like over 5,000 special operators, and they looked at them for those that slept 4 hours or less versus those, they put them in 2 buckets, 8 hour or more, and then looked at the rate of musculoskeletal injuries. Those that slept 4 hours or less were, I think, 2.35 times more likely to have a musculoskeletal injury. And there's been studies that show that affects your balance, being sleep deprived. So now you add it under load, under kit, all these sort of things that exacerbate it, and you go out and you roll an ankle, these sort of things that could have possibly been mitigated by getting a good night of sleep or getting the appropriate rest. So if you know you're going to be fatigued, if you know, for whatever reason you're not going to get enough sleep, or you had a rough day, is making that choice and that training protocol of like, all right, maybe I'm not going to do snatches today or whatever's on the menu, because that takes a lot of coordination. I'm going to put a weight above my head. I need to be fresh and rested for that. Let's change the programming.
Yeah, really good point. Well, I guess the final section of this is, what's left, Doc, as well as other than smart training, good nutrition, good sleep. Something that I have engaged in over the last 10 years is flexibility and mobility. And let me tell you, when I tell people, like, you need to focus on your weakness, 9 times out of 10, everybody has a weakness in flexibility and mobility. I mean, it's just something we do not do. And if you really want to focus on a weakness, you want to challenge in your later years, like I'm talking like 45 to 52 was when I started all this, is that weekly mobility day in replace of a really hard workout has been life-changing for me, and one, preventing injuries, but also just walking out of the gym and not feeling any pain. I mean, there's literally a time in my day when I'm like, wow, nothing hurts. And this comes 20 years after being at a place and time where I had to really rethink how I was going to start training again because everything hurt. So you can redevelop yourself even after killing it in your 20s and hitting that wall where everything falls apart, to making it better in your 30s and your 40s and your 50s and beyond, to a point where you're actually learning all of these things that we're talking about and getting better at them, almost like one at a time. Like every 5 years, you're like, oh, I'm getting better at my sleep. I'm getting better at my nutrition. I'm getting better at flexibility, mobility. Next thing you know, 15, 20 years later, you've actually accumulated a nice little backpack of recovery tools that are going to take you into your later years pain-free or less pain.
No, I mean, yeah, mobility, some sort of like, I don't know if you do like fascia relief.
Oh yeah,
That's a little more
foam
painful.
roller.
That,
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
yeah. And if the younger kids, again, it's something I didn't really understand or know about till later, is like fascia. Like,
yeah,
read up on that. I think Bill Parisi's got a good book on that, fascia training, it might be called, or what have you. But yeah, just understanding that hey, you're basically a sausage, and you have this tissue over it that can get bound up. And then sometimes getting in there and rolling it out and really digging in and getting it loosened up, and then you combine that with some mobility, and you can get some range of motion back. That's very powerful. So
absolutely. Range of motion is 100% key, and range of motion pain-free is the jackpot.
Oh yeah.
Right. And it can be done. Like I've had, bad shoulder injuries and bad leg injuries. And, now it's getting better because I actively pursue recovery. That is like the magic term. Like you really have to consider it as every part of your day. Like I look at what I eat as, this is going to help me recover from what I just did. And it's going to give me energy for what I do tomorrow. Right. That's how I look at it. And when I go to sleep, I'm like, I need to go to sleep because I got a big day tomorrow and I need to be well rested. Right. And all of these things are it's just a longevity mindset, I guess, if we want to come up with a fancy term for it.
Right. No.
It really is focus. And if you could just focus on two things, nutrition and sleep, you're going to have 90% of this figured out.
Big ROI. You're going to get a lot of return for that. So that would be it. Yeah. If you can focus on that. I don't know. Do we want to, touch briefly on supplementation at all? I just because I know people ask you about that.
Yeah, I think
I get
it'd be
asked
really
about it.
good too, because my question for you is this: when I was younger, it was all about extra protein, lifting weights, getting stronger, getting bigger. Whey protein seemed to be a big part of what I was doing. As I am aging, I'm finding other sources of protein to be very helpful. Collagen peptide, as a protein source, seems to be replacing my need for whey, but I want to make sure it actually is before I, continue further. How much do we need whey? How much do we need collagen protein? Or do we need extra of both or not?
Well, depending on what, you're eating, you can get all your protein requirements from eating food.
Oh, sure.
But understanding, like you're out there training for 2 hours with these young folks in the morning. It might be more convenient for a shake, like right after training, versus, grilling some chicken or making some eggs, particularly if you got to run to another project, et cetera. So whey protein is the higher quality, right? Protein. You're getting,
Right.
those
All
essential
the
amino acids, a better
and,
profile.
yeah.
You're not getting that with collagen, but it's not, to me, it's not a either, or type scenario. Collagen's kind of for a different, that's more for joint health. That's
Right.
where I'm looking at it. And where I'm looking at that from, there's a great paper, Dr. Keith Barr did, where, they essentially gave people Jell-O, I think it was, 10 to 20 grams of Jello with 50 milligrams of vitamin C, because vitamin C helps with collagen synthesis in the joints, before jumping rope, just an exercise stimulus. And then they pulled the blood and they looked at, the collagen protein in the blood, and, was it getting to the tissues, and that was effective enough. So just, getting maybe 10 to 20 grams of Jello, essentially you can mix that up with a vitamin C source, again, 50 milligrams, not that much, nothing crazy. Could be maybe a splash of orange juice before you go and do some sort of workout, particularly maybe like a plyometric or something like that, could stimulate getting, that collagen synthesis going on. Whereas,
so it's, I'm sorry, so it's not a matter of, it's not a matter of either or, it's a matter of figuring out how to balance both of them.
Yep. So I would say I would use that collagen pre-workout, and I would use that whey post-workout if I was going to, program that in there.
All right, I got you. How about other helpful? How about aging supplements, or that help you on that backside of things? I've heard a lot about turmeric or what is turmeric?
Curcumin. Yeah, turmeric. Another great. So for recovery, and it goes great with recovery, studies that it lowers delayed onset muscle soreness. Now there's studies that show, taking it pre, but most of them it's post. So I would recommend a post dose around 1,500 to 2,000 milligrams.
Okay.
You want pepperine, which is from black pepper, because it increases absorption significantly, because curcumin is kind of hard to absorb. So you want it, with that. I do like a turmeric tonic shot. It's just like a little shot that I take that's got some black pepper in it. I like that. I've done the pills before.
Have you tried the gummies?
But I have not tried the gummies. Wow, I didn't know that. I'll have to look into that.
Yeah, it's not bad. It's like an orange flavored. It's pretty good.
Does it have the pepperine in it, or the pepper? You see?
I need my other reading glasses on. I can't even see.
Yeah, that would be my only thing.
That's another thing with aging.
Yeah.
My arms aren't long enough.
Well, there was just a paper, goji berries. An ounce of goji berries 5 days a week for 90 days increases the pigments that are protective in your eye. So maybe try goji berries. This was I just read this morning. But for the curcumin, it is important to try to get that pepperine or black pepper or something in there, because it really does help with absorption. So you can get it in there. But that's one of the ones that's good for aging. I take creatine monohydrate. Both muscle power athletes, but now there's a lot of research with the brain, so you can get the phosphocreatine levels in your brain. There's a study in rats. It lowers sleep pressure. So even particularly cognitive function, sleep, when you're sleep deprived, there's some research showing maybe that creatine could help with cognitive function. So I take creatine monohydrate. Vitamin D.
Oh yeah.
Vitamin D is another thing. So folks that have low vitamin D levels, I think it's 20 nanograms per deciliter and lower, are a lot more likely to suffer from sleep issues. And because you have a vitamin D receptor in your brain, so getting adequate can help with sleep, but then also testosterone. Obviously, people know about bone. You have a vitamin D receptors in your muscle. It can affect the muscle. So 2,000 IUs to 5,000 IUs. I took more vitamin D like when I was at West Point, because of the winters. Up there, you're not getting much sun. It's whereas now in Texas, I was in a t-shirt yesterday, so I can take a little more sunlight, take a little less. So knowing that that climate and those seasonal effect, knowing that I would actually up my vitamin D intake. If you're up north, you're dealing with snow, you're not really going outside. Maybe I go 5,000 IUs to 10,000 IUs, depending on the diet. And then omega-3 fatty acids, fish oil, EPA, DHA is also about 2,000 milligrams a day. And this is there is some research for muscle health, but mainly my focus is cognitive function, as far as brain health.
Okay.
For our tactical athletes, you have some concussive forces. If you shoot a goose off, or overpressure for breaching, or, you have a bad jump and you land and you hit, or you're doing combatives, all these factors. There was a study out of Texas Christian University with football players, and they looked at those receiving 2,000 milligrams versus a placebo of fish oil a day. And those that got the 2,000 milligrams had lower tau proteins in their blood, which is a marker of those concussive, forces associated with it. So again, this is something I'm kind of taking as my preemptive strike in case my toddler comes up and smacks me upside my head. I can be protected against concussive forces, but then overall cardiovascular health too. It can help lower triglycerides. So that's
and
my
anti-inflammatory properties as well.
And anti-inflammatory, right? It goes through those pathways where the omega-6 fatty acids, which we're getting a lot more in the American diet, goes towards those inflammatory pathways. So having a better balance as well. So those are the main ones. I also do for kind of my sleep supplement, I do magnesium at night. That helps with it, about 200 milligrams. I take of magnesium before I go to sleep. Vitamin D, omega-3, magnesium. We talked about curcumin or turmeric, creatine, and that's it.
Fiber?
And then for my fiber, I eat a lot of plants.
Yeah.
So
get plenty of fiber naturally.
I would recommend fiber, particularly any prebiotic to help with your gut bacteria. That was another study when I was looking at sleep and kind of nutrition. Chronic antibiotic intake can affect sleep cycles, and one of the ways to combat that was probiotics and prebiotics. And I think, again, going back to the tactical athlete, that was the anti-malarial of choice was Doxy. I know in Afghanistan. So warfighters were on that 9 months to a year of you're taking Doxy because it's better than getting malaria.
Yeah.
But then what that does to your microbiota, and then how that might be affecting your sleep. So that's why probiotics, prebiotics, getting enough fiber, very important. Even the bacillus coagulans help with protein absorption. So getting those in when you take protein can actually help get the most out of the protein. That's why yogurt's so great, right? You're getting some high quality whey protein. You've got the bacillus coagulans that's going to help maximize that absorption.
Nice work, Doc.
Hey, get me talking about nutrition, Stu. I could go all day.
Oh, that's why I wanted you on here, because it's so instrumental in the term longevity and, of course, recovery. But there's also some nice little ways that you can top it off. And at least this, if you fix your nutrition, you're at least going to have the energy to do all the other things, which in turn, if you utilize that energy, will make you more tired at the end of the day, which makes you fall asleep better. So it's this big circle. If you really if you really want to hit recovery properly, start with your nutrition, and then from there it will make you a better sleeper, and then from there it's just going to make you a lot healthier living longer. So
right. No, 100%. So just doing the basics. Again, I wish there was like a magic pill I could say. Well, plus I'd probably be, you and I both would be rich if we could say, hey, there's just one thing you've never heard of that'll, change your life. But really, yeah, it's, sleep, eat plants, vegetables, some good quality protein, and get some exercise. And, that'll cure most of what ails you in life.
That is true. And, it's the non-sexy answer, and it's not groundbreaking. Right. I mean, no. It's not groundbreaking stuff we're talking here. I mean, it is just literally just getting and doing it and learning what works for you, because, people are all kinds of different diets. But in the end of the day, it really comes down to how are you limiting the calories you're bringing in, right? And how are you burning off the calories you are bringing in? Right. So there's all types of different diets that allow you to eat at a certain time, reduce your caloric intake, to eliminate a food group and reduce your caloric intake. So at the end of the day, like you said, it's a energy balance, and that deficit. Now this has been very helpful. Kind of just putting it in my head even more clearly, and hopefully people listening have kind of got the same thing from what you were putting out there, Doc.
No, it's again, I'm always happy to talk nutrition with anyone. And I don't know if you have any listeners. If you don't mind, I'll put a plug. I work at the graduate program in nutrition. So although I know most of your folks are training to go into special operations, if anybody's really interested in nutrition and exercise, and you'd want to do that in the military full time, that's our program we have here. And you get a degree from Baylor, you get paid to go to school, and you have a guaranteed job when you get out.
Man, that's awesome. And it's about time we did this too. I mean, whether it's physiologists and it's nutritionists, because once again, when I started this, journey back in the 90s, I realized that we just don't treat ourselves like athletes. And, with programs like you just mentioned, the military is actually starting to do that. Or I shouldn't say starting. They've been doing it for the last decade and a half, but it's becoming more generally accepted. And, even the young privates and the young seamen that are out there and, that are out there doing the basic jobs can start taking in some of this information to a point where, I am an athlete. I need to treat myself like an athlete. I need to sleep this much. I need to eat this well. I don't need to do this much caffeine. I don't need to do nicotine and smoking tobacco or dipping or things like that, because it's at the end of the day, it's not going to be that helpful for you in the long-term picture. And unfortunately, when we're younger, we don't really think long-term. We don't even save money, for long-term. But eventually, you're going to come to a point where you need to start doing that. You start creating the budgets and saving, and also fitness budgets and nutrition budgets. And something that has helped me over the last few years is a nutrition diary. So I actually, at the end of the day, I write down everything that I have eaten. And in fact, I have a clipboard and a pen right next to the kitchen counter. And if I'm going to put it in my mouth, I write it down. And just that process of having to write down what you're about to eat will help you eliminate a majority of those little needless snackings that you need, whether it's a bag of chips or it's a spoonful of peanut butter or whatever. Just get that drink of water and cut down those calories a little bit. So all right, I'm going to give you the last word there, Doc. It's all yours.
Well, at the last word, I'm going to use it to thank you, Stu, because as you said, we're coming a long way, but we wouldn't be where we are today if it wasn't for someone like you that paved the way for tactical athletes. When I was looking, when I was a new lieutenant in the Army, in training protocols and how I should train, there was only one reference out there, and that was Stu Smith. And so, your work and then what you're doing with, these young future war fighters every morning, I see on Instagram, you're out there training that next generation of heroes is just absolutely awesome. So thank you for paving the way. So folks like me can have fun and have a job and get to do this for a living.
Oh, well, thank you. That's way too nice. But I do appreciate the sentiment. I do enjoy working with younger people, and I will say this, all of you who are listening, you do give me hope for the future, because there are people right now who are making very selfless decisions on whether, to serve, whether that's their country or it's their community in the fire or police service. And, I couldn't be more excited about the future, as when I see people like this every single day of my life, at 6 a.m. in the winter, working out outside and just getting after it. And it's been a thrill for me as well. So I really do appreciate you coming on. I enjoy your Instagram as well. And keep posting good stuff. And
I keep trying.
it's a great way to communicate with folks. And I'd really like to have you on here again. Maybe we can think of another more specific topic to discuss, because we went really broad today. Just the recovery process alone is a 10 chapter process that we just really just touched on in this hour-long show. So but nutrition is where it starts. It really is. And so I really appreciate all that you're doing. Thanks for serving. Thanks for helping me out with this podcast as well, because I can't give the type of information that you just gave, right? It's just, one, I don't know it, and two, I don't know it eloquently enough to even spit it out the way you did. And your research backup is always so impressive too, that there's studies behind all of everything that you just said, which is what it's all about, when you're dealing with this world. So thank you very much.
Thanks, dude.
So where can people find you, Nick?
So yeah, on Instagram, I think I don't even know what my Instagram is. It's Nick Barringer, PhD.
Yeah. I'll tag them in the I'll tag
just tag that
as well as
then,
Baylor
I'm
University
in Baylor. Yeah, the master's program in nutrition. So it's the Army Baylor. We're here at the Medical Center of Excellence in Joint Base San Antonio. So again, every dietitian coming into the Army who doesn't already have their RD comes through our program. So we're training those future dietitians to go out there and fuel
Awesome.
the war fighters.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much for that. That's for sure. All right, folks. Well, that's it for the Tactical Fitness Report. We'll do this again. Nick, I really do appreciate your time as always. And keep getting after it.
Thank you.